How you doing? I'm here today with Ismahil. He's a regular here speaker. He speaks on politics at Speaker's Corner. Ismahil, what's your general worldview?
Well, general view is about current affairs, politics, that the world, I think that we could live in a better world, and that if more people are aware of what's actually happening and take responsibility, personal responsibility. So my final message is about freeing yourself and personal responsibility.
So let's get down to an actual issue so we get some interesting thoughts. Currently the surge or whatever that's going on in Afghanistan, what's your views on that? And also, in particular, I'd like your opinion on drones and their dehumanisation of war.
Well, I mean, I don't have an opinion about the surge. I don't think that Western forces should be there in the first place. I don't think there's any justification for Western forces to be in Afghanistan, neither Iraq or even Pakistan. So, I mean, I think that sort of makes the whole point redundant as to what I think about the surge. I think it answers in that way.
So, like, okay, well, just on the second point, the dehumanisation of war with use of drones and the lack of soldiers, do you think that's to me that's a terrifying prospect for the future? What are your opinions on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's quite easy to dehumanise people who are considered other, people who we have no real connection with. We don't know the language, we don't know the food they eat, we don't know the music, we don't know the culture, and it's quite easy to dehumanize the people when we don't know much about them. And so it's quite easy for Western governments to sort of go into countries like Afghanistan, like Iraq, and to spin whatever story they want as to why they're there. Or we're there to free women, we're there for democracy, we're there to stop terrorism. It's quite easy, and I think there's an overall a broader agenda, which is imperialism.
So, my own personal view to do with extreme Islam's fundamentalism is to do with the impact of basically Western foreign policy and colonialism over the centuries or whatever. That leaves us still with the problem, even if we don't agree with going into Afghanistan, and how do we actually deal with that issue in itself? What would your solution be?
Well, I think looking at the scale of the threat, first of all, I mean, you're Irish, you're aware of terms of the sort of conflict, the Irish struggles that you had that was against with the British and stuff, and the sort of attacks that were perpetrated here by the IRA, a campaign which lasted 30 years, the bombing of the Docklands, Hyde Park, the city, the Brighton bombings. You know, there's a scale. So let's put what's been happening here into perspective. Do you know what I mean? And so
it's a lot less than the IRA bombings.
It's a lot less, and but that still doesn't justify what it is. You know, any act of terrorism is an act of terrorism, and there are issues of extremists in Britain. But look at the scale and the context, whereby the IRA used Semtex. What you have is young guys who are marginalised, who feel disenfranchised, who look on the internet, and then decide that they want to sort of do or act in response. And that I think is not just about young Muslims. It's about any angry person in society. I don't know if you remember, there was a case of some young white racist, who planted the nail bombs in Soho, the bombs in Brixton, and that's someone who's marginalised, disenfranchised. And so, so let's look at the root causes as to what may.
Well, absolutely. For me, I think you see lots of problems in Palestine and related countries that seem to have a very distinct impact on Islamism in the world. How do you actually deal, though, with the large-scale Al-Qaeda type bombings and not just the small individual guys with some fertilizer? How do you deal with that problem?
Well, I think you deal with it the way you do with any form of terrorism. You try to isolate it, you try to identify the sources, you try to arrest them, you try to sort of neutralise those threats. I'm not against sort of neutralising threats of terrorism. If they have evidence, if the state has evidence against people who are responsible for September 11th, they should go after them.
But for example, like, that doesn't get to root cause. So, for example, in the IRA situation, locking up guys for IRA never made any bit of difference. You know, it made what made difference was talking and settlement. And politics. We don't seem to have any avenue towards political integration of people like Hamas or people like whatever type of Al-Qaeda wing you want to. Yeah. So or even talking to the state of Syria, for example, or even talking to the state of Iran, who've never invaded anybody. How do you alleviate these things?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head, and you've addressed the problem yourself. You know, the draconian policies such as Guantanamo Bay, of mass arrests, of imprisonment, and those things.
Just like internment in Northern Ireland.
Internment, it doesn't work. You know, but what certainly has worked is dialogue. When the British government decided to sort of open talks with the IRA, we had some movement, and that's, I think, exactly what needs to happen. But it's very difficult because there are no real heads of Al-Qaeda. Who do you negotiate with? You know, and to a large part, I think a lot of it is also mythical. I think a lot of the sort of talk of Al-Qaeda is exaggerated within the mainstream media because they have agendas for sort of Afghanistan, Iraq, and everywhere else. So you have to create the sort of threat to sort of suit the to address the response.
So I have a question with you to do with like armed resistance in areas of degradation such as Palestine, and what do you think about it as a type of as a strategy or as a tactic, and its impact on humans?
Well, I think that's very, very difficult, because I'd like to sort of not denounce armed struggle, because it has its place.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, people pick up arms as a means of frustration. But at the same time, they should, if you are engaged in warfare, you should know exactly who your targets are. I cannot condone Palestinians, whether it be Hamas or anyone else, targeting innocent civilians, whether they be Israeli or otherwise. You know, so I'm totally against that. However, I do think, you know, as you addressed earlier, the point is dialogue, and I think. When you have two sides that really do wish to address the cause of issues within society, that you can get some movement.
That's great, Ismail. Thanks for chatting to us, and hopefully that came out. Alex, do you have any final questions you'd like to ask?
Just asking, would you ever think about going to politics?
Yeah, do you ever think about actually, I know your activism, but like actually formalising it? Or
I'm in politics. I come here every Sunday. I think this is one of the most free, open and free spaces for democratic discussion and exchange, whereby you have an audience of which you don't know who's going to be here from across the world with different opinions, different ideas, and we can exchange these ideas. I think this is real politics. I think most politics are corrupt, and in fact, I'm very disillusioned. I'm disillusioned with politics and politicians. They say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. So I've got no confidence in politicians or politics, but I do have confidence in people politics, and that's exactly what we practice right here at Speaker's Corner.
Well, I have one final non-related question, and I think I was down here before and he slagged me for having red hair, so I'd just like to say, slagged me all the time. I was wondering, have you ever had sexual relations with a redheaded woman?
I think once, and I'd like to have and it was a pleasant experience, and I'd like to reenact it again.
Well, did you hear that, Mother? Okay, thanks very much. Yeah. Thanks.